I heard several announcements about the restrooms. I don't need to address them. But if you do have questions, Owings Mills librarian Laurie Shaw. Laurie's not in the room, but that's Joanna. She can answer questions soon. I have to say one thing, and some of you have heard this before. My guess is that everybody here in this audience is like me. You value your ability to choose what you read, what you listen to, and your unfettered access to information as one of the bulwarks of our democracy. It is crucial that every one of us exercises our freedom to select our own books, exercise our freedom to read and to support our authors and their work, and that means authors and books and library programs which reflect the many and varied people and experiences which make up all of our communities across this nation. So we thank you for your support. Now, speaking of books and reading, on your seats you all have a handout for what I call the warm-up act today. It's Librarians Recommend. Doug, Joanna, and I are going to share some quick book recommendations with you. And I do mean quick because Julie Brophy, in the chair there, is going to be timing us with a timer. And if we rattle on too long, you are going to hear. All right, Doug's up first.
Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Doug. I am also an adult and community engagement specialist. And my first book is called Mississippi Blue 42 by Eli Craner. Now, it is a book about football. And I will tell you, if I willingly read a book about football and enjoy it, it has to be a good book. Well, it's also about a crime. So when the book starts, a quarterback at the University of Central Mississippi is flung from the top of a bar and lands on top of a bag of money right in front of Special Agent Ray Johnson. And she is there to kind of figure out financial shenanigans in the university. As we all know, university football characters, things I didn't know about. Apparently there are things called bagmen who get high school seniors, they meet them in Waffle Houses, they give them bags of cash to get them to sign up to be on the team. There's gridiron girls who entice the high school seniors to get them to the bagmen, and maybe Congress is involved with a congressman named Harry Christmas. All of these characters come together in such an interesting way. They're all very quirky and delightful, and the book really moves quickly. If you love football, you want to learn more, and you like a little crime in your story, this one's for you.
So my first book is Medicine River, A Story of Survival and the Legacy of Indian Boarding Schools by Mary Annette Pember. This one is nonfiction. Pember is a citizen of the Red Cliff Band of the Wisconsin Ojibwe, and she's also a journalist. So after the Civil War, the United States turned its sights to the issue of what to do with the Indians, the Native Americans who had been living here first in North America, and were now impeding progress and westward expansion. One of the solutions, which was funded by the federal government, were the Indian boarding schools. In Medicine River, Pember is writing about two things. First, her family, particularly her mother, who at 5 years old went to live at an Indian boarding school in Wisconsin. This overarching philosophy, not just of that school, but of all the native boarding schools, was kill the Indian to save the man, meaning that the schools were meant to wipe out any trace of native culture in the children with the goal of total assimilation. It's estimated that roughly 75% of native children spent time in those schools by 1920, and Pember explores the generational trauma that was caused by this message, which was hammered into her mother and the children in general, that because they were Indian, they were fundamentally wrong. And she discusses how that reverberated throughout her family, the dysfunction that it caused, but she also looks at the broader picture, not just her own family, because the book is to some extent a biography. It's serious but good.
Okay, I hope that might give me a heart attack. I'm Joanna. I'm the librarian here at Owings Mills. My first book is called Murder by Cheesecake, A Golden Girls Cozy Mystery, and it's by Rachel Courage. It was recently released. I'm a huge Golden Girls fan, so I chose this one. It gives a nostalgic feel of a Golden Girls episode. You start off like any Golden Girls episode in the kitchen with them, and then you kind of go on their journeys. It has a lot of the humor, the scene setting, and the plot that makes it feel like you're watching a newly released episode of The Golden Girls, which is kind of nice. It takes you right back to your couch in the 90s or early 2000s. And it follows Sophia, Dorothy, Blanche, and Rose as they plan a wedding for Rose's niece, which ends up being a surprise twist, which is murder. It has a perfect feel for those cozy mystery lovers, and it gives you, again, that nostalgic feel of watching one of the episodes. It's perfect for a beach read, or a rainy evening on the couch, or even a cozy fall mystery if you are looking for something for the fall. And like I said, it is a pretty easy read. If you like whodunits, this is a pretty good one to read as well. And it has a lot of like sass and humor. So if you're into sass and humor, which I absolutely love, it's for you. Thank you, guys.
My next book is one of my favorite books I've read this year. It's called A Murder for Miss Hortense by Mel Pennant. Miss Hortense is kind of like the Jamaican Miss Marple. She moves to a little town in England, and when she gets there, she finds that banks are not really, they really don't want to give any to black people or immigrants. So she goes back to her community and they form what's called a partner. And I've never heard about this, but it's where the community gets together and they all put funds into the community itself. And then people can take money from that fund and they can start houses, buy houses, get businesses started. And so Miss Hortense is known as the partner lady. The book picks up in the 90s, the late 90s, and we find out that for some reason, Miss Hortense is no longer the partner lady and is no longer welcome. But the new partner lady, Constance Brown, invites her back and wants to bring her back in. Miss Hortense says no, and the next day, Constance Brown is dead. We find out through I know. But we find out also that this partner doesn't just deal in funds, they also try to solve crimes that may come back. But I really love this book. There's a character named Blossom who's Miss Hortense's best friend who actually gets herself into a lot of trouble by doing absolutely everything wrong. And she provides a lot of comic relief. And Miss Hortense is no nonsense. And she is going to get to the bottom of anything. I'm really looking forward to see if she comes back in a new book.
The only reason I'm not talking about Miss Hortense is because Doug got there first. All right, my next book is a little on the lighter side, All the Other Mothers Hate Me by Sarah Hartman. So Florence Grimes is an American living in London. She's also a 31-year-old has-been pop star. She's prone to sparkly band tees and partying all night long, get that lyric reference, and she has trouble scraping together the rent money. But she's also a single mom to Dylan. He's age 10. He's a serious, sweet, little old man of a boy. We've all known little boys like that. His concerns include animal welfare and recycling, and he prefers the company of grown-ups. So as you can guess, none of this is in the recipe for popularity for mother or son at Dylan's posh and proper private school paid for by his dad. When schoolmate Alfie, whose unpleasant traits include bullying both small animals and Dylan, Alfie goes missing on a class field trip, and Florence finds some possibly incriminating evidence under Alfie's bed, she has to pull her dilettante self together to figure out what happened to Alfie in order to protect Dylan and prove his innocence. Author Sarah Hartman is also an American living in London, and she's written a fun, smart mystery, perfect for poolside, vacations, summer lounging. But this book's also being developed into a TV show on FX, so if you don't feel like reading it, you might be able to watch it soon.
Oh, wow. You were about to get pumped. Ready? Yeah. Okay. This next one is Ballerina by Patrick Modiano. He is a Nobel Literature Prize winner. It's a very short novel. It's about 95 pages, and it follows a ballerina. I don't believe we learn her name at all in the novel. Her son Pierre and the narrator through a specific period in their distant past. She's a single mother. She kind of had a tough past, so we kind of learn a little bit about what that past is like. Through bits of storytelling, we learn not only what they were doing during that time period, but you end up getting a little bit of hint of romance between the narrator and the ballerina. The book makes you feel like you're really having a conversation with somebody. So it's like a friend telling you a story about something that they have going on in their past. It doesn't follow a specific plot or storyline, so you kind of get little mix and pieces of their background. But what you'll realize is that it starts to blend past and present. So you can't really tell if everything's the truth or if it's something that he made up along the way, because his past and his present start to kind of get mixed together. So the details are a little fuzzy on there. It does have a real feeling, sorry, lost my train of thought. It has this weird feeling of, am I actually being told a story that happened, or am I being told something that was made up, and what is real and what is fake? While we don't know what truly happens, what you end up realizing at the end is that your past and your present have so much to do with one another, and the fact that they both blend in so much, and your past self does become your present self. It's a pretty easy read. It's a pretty easy read. That's where we're at.
Okay, my last book is called Ink Ribbon Red by Alex Pavese. I'm not sure how to explain this one because you're going to get to the middle of the book and you're probably going to be questioning everything you know about reality. It starts with a 30th birthday party. Anatole is in his family home. His father has just died. And so it's his 30th birthday, so he decides to invite 5 of his friends over. And some of the friends are pretty convinced that Anatole might have murdered his father in order to get the house. But we'll get to that point later. So as anyone would do on your 30th birthday, they decide to play a game, right? They're going to play method, motive, death. So what they do is everybody puts their names into a bowl. They have to pull 2 names out of the bowl, and everyone has to write a story where one of the friends is the killer, one of the friends is the victim. And it has to take place on the property, and it has to be convincing. Well, you know, if you're friends and you don't like them, or you may have dirt on them, some of these stories get very interesting, and in the middle you'll start kind of wondering what is fiction and what is reality and what is the truth. It gets really crazy for a while. It does tie up very neatly, but it's one of the weirdest, wildest rides you'll be on, so I really recommend it. It'll keep you going, keep you up at night.
All right, my next book has a lot going on, so I'll probably get honked, but anyway. Has anybody here read S.A. Cosby?
Yes.
All right, so he's from rural Southern Virginia. He still lives there and he sets his stories there. And King of Ashes is being called a Black Godfather tale. And that means the mafia kind of godfather, not the kind you invite to your baby's christening. Roman Carruthers is an Atlanta-based wealth management advisor living the high life. He gets a call from his sister to come home now because his father's been in a car accident and he's comatose. Home is Jefferson Run, a formerly thriving town until the factories and the jobs moved out and the drugs moved in. Roman arrives to find his younger brother owing a vast sum of cash to the local and remarkably vicious, and I do mean remarkably vicious, if you read it you'll see what I mean, criminal enterprise headed up by a pair of psychopathic brothers named Tranquil and Torrent. There are several threads to pick at here. Was their father's car accident really an attempted murder? What happened to their mother, who disappeared several years ago? How is the married police officer their sister's having an affair with connected to all of this? Most urgently, can Roman, now the head of this fractured family, use his skills, which include spinning dirty money into gold, to prevent the psychopathic brothers from killing the whole family? Just know that the Carruthers family crematorium has a role to play in this book.
What a way to end.
Ready? All right, the last one is Anxious People by Frederick Beckman. It's a bit of a mystery, a bit of a comedy, and has a bit of a life-changing story. We start off with a bank robbery, which turns into a hostage situation in an apartment that is currently being viewed by a bunch of different individuals. The hostage situation kind of spans throughout the majority of the book. So what you learn is you are in a room with about 9 or 10 different characters, all of different ages, all throughout different stages of their lives. You have people as old as like 70. You have individuals who are in their 20s who are starting life. They're all looking at this apartment, and then there's obviously the hostage, which was not trying to be a hostage. They were trying to be a bank robber. The majority of the book, like I said, we do follow those characters. They're a wide variety of different people, and it truly leaves a big impact on the reader. You learn that even though all these characters are at different stages in their lives, nobody has it together, and everybody's just trying to figure it out, which makes it one of my favorite books. I would really recommend it to anyone, but especially if you're younger, in your younger 20s, and you feel like you should have it together. It makes you realize that nobody has it together. We're all just trying to figure this out. It's a mess. But what you do learn at the end, and it's not so much of a crime or a mystery story, it's kind of a coming together story and creating community. It does have a very community feel at the end, which makes it feel nice. And yeah.
Thank you, folks. I hope everybody's heard about at least one book that you want to add to your to-be-read list. All right, we're going to move on to the main event. Dolen Perkins Valdez, author of Happy Land, who is going to be in conversation with Sonia Alcantara-Antoine, who is the CEO of Baltimore County Public Library. Sonia is also the past president of the Public Library Association. She was named as one of the top 100 women in Maryland, a 2023 leader in diversity, and a 2025 woman of influence. Previously, she was the director of the Newport News Public Library in Virginia. Sonia is a Library Association Spectrum Scholar. She holds a master's degree in Library and Information Science from Florida State University and a second master's in Public Administration from Old Dominion. And Sonia is speaking with Dolen Perkins Valdez, who is the New York Times best-selling author of the books Wench, Balm, and Take My Hand. Take My Hand's many accolades included the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work of Fiction, the 2023 Black Caucus of the American Library Association's Award for Fiction, and the American Bar Association awarded their prestigious, I have to read this, Silver Gavel Award, which recognizes an outstanding work that fosters the American public's understanding of the law and the legal system. Her book Wench was a finalist for 2 NAACP Image Awards and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award for Fiction. Dolen has established herself as the preeminent chronicler of American historical life. She wrote an introduction to a special edition of Solomon Northrup's 12 Years a Slave, an introduction to Elizabeth Keckley's Behind the Scenes, and the 75th anniversary edition of George Orwell's 1984. She is a 3-time nominee for a United States Artist Fellowship. And with all of that going on, she's also currently an associate professor in the literature department at American University. She also served as the chair of the Penn Faulkner Foundation's board of directors. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her family. And her newest novel, which hit the shelves, I believe, in April, is Happy Land. And it is a multi-generational tale of a mountaintop kingdom, biased property rights laws, and a very unconventional love story, all inspired by a true story. Please welcome Dolen and Sonia.
Yeah. That's good. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here today. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, you may have heard, but you all chose to be here, so thank you for being here. How many of you guys have read the book? Most of you? How many of you are like halfway through? Okay, there's a couple. I just finished reading the book this morning because I wasn't about to show up here and not have finished the book, and it was wonderful. It was a truly, truly wonderful book. So thank you for writing this book. Tell us more about this book and the inspiration behind it.
Well, I can truly say, first of all, thank you to everybody who made this event happen today. Lori, especially for dealing with my tardy email replies, and you, Sonia, for just preparing for I know it takes work to prepare for a talk, so thank you. And to everybody for coming. It is actually a beautiful day outside, and my mom, who is here, always shout out to my two high school girlfriends, Danita and Rachel, White Station. Okay, those are my shout outs. Okay, now my question. So, I can really say that I was inspired by the people of the kingdom. These people were pretty extraordinary. They were originally from Spartanburg County, South Carolina. They came up that mountain seeking to establish a new life. They make a deal with and this is all like in the book, but also what actually happened, the reason I wrote the book. They make a deal with this woman who had property there that they would help her in exchange for living on the land. They pool all of their money together in a communal treasury. They developed, the women of the kingdom developed a product called the Happy Land Liniment, which was by all accounts successful. So they were not only audacious and ambitious, but they were entrepreneurs, They, eventually buy the land. And so I was just inspired by their audaciousness, their brilliance, their creativity. And it was one of those like little pockets of history that nobody really knew about outside of some of the Hendersonville residents. And I thought I wanted to share that story. That was sort of why I wrote it. That's why I wrote it.
Wonderful. So I'm curious about your research process. So did you go down to Hendersonville? Did you get to meet some of the descendants of Wella? How did that pan out?
So during the pandemic, this is how I discovered the kingdom, and it also leads to the research answer. My pandemic hobby, and everybody had a pandemic hobby.
Yes.
Whether it was like sourdough bread or I don't know what else, doing puzzles or whatever we all did to stay sane, I decided I wanted to teach myself the banjo, which was something that I had wanted to do for a long time, but I didn't have a banjo. And during the pandemic, I found one on Craigslist, and I went and met somebody in the parking lot, had it in his trunk. And I came home with this banjo, and I was learning, and I was listening to a lot of old-time music, and I was researching Black banjo players in North Carolina, and I stumbled on this history, but it was still the pandemic. There was one name that kept popping up, Ronnie Pepper, who was a librarian at the Henderson County Library. And he was going around sharing the story of the kingdom as a sort of oral narrative, and his name kept popping up. And so I sent him an email, and he immediately responded. And over the next year, Ronnie and I talked. We emailed, we texted, we talked on the phone, we got to know each other during the pandemic. And once it was safe to travel, I booked a flight to Hendersonville. And on my way down there, Ronnie, before I was about to go, Ronnie said, well, you can stay with my friend Suzanne. She's on the Black History Research Committee with me. He was chair of the Black History Research Committee. And I said, well, no, that's okay. My university is paying for my hotel. And, I didn't know Suzanne, so, it's kind of odd to, stay in someone's house. And, of course, I meet Suzanne, fall in love with her. She's a great cook. She cooked me this fantastic dinner. She had a huge house, and she was like, why didn't you stay with me? And I was like, I don't know why. And Ronnie, Suzanne, and I sat around her table. She was like the nicest person. Everybody in North Carolina, every time I went, I got a meal. It was like the loveliest community down there. And we sat around her dinner table talking about the kingdom and how interested we all were in learning what actually happened. And so the three of us together actually researched the kingdom. Ronnie was sort of the voice of wisdom and would point us in the right direction and keep us sort of, on the path and not going down rabbit holes. He also, as a person who worked at the library, could point us to resources. Suzanne retired. Later I would learn, because she's very humble, later I would learn she's a former diplomat. and had like retired in Hendersonville, but used to live in this area as a foreign service person. She just did a lot of legwork. She would call me and she'd say, I'm driving down to Spartanburg and I'm going to the archives. Is there anything you want me to look up? And I'm like, yes, actually. So I had her as my boots on the ground. And then I was looking through all the digital things when I would come back here. And then I would just periodically go down there, and we knew that no one had researched the kingdom in over 60 years. There had been this pamphlet that was published in 1957, but beyond that, there was no new information. And so it was exciting, it was fun. We became lifelong friends. I'm very grateful for them. I've always consulted the locals, but this is the first time I've really worked with the locals. So I would say the three of us did a lot of that research together. And if you go to my website, Suzanne, of course, who is the Energizer Bunny, got us a grant to create a web display of the actual kingdom. And we worked with a public historian from Asheville, and it's on the Blue Ridge Community College website. So you can see the link if you go to my website. It's right there. You can click on it and you'll see, after you finish the book, because we don't want there to be any spoilers, you can see everything that we found in the research.
And I love that you did the research with the librarian.
Yeah.
And there's a librarian in the book.
Oh, and that librarian, I told Ronnie, this is, because Ronnie, he's an older gentleman, but I want to have a young, handsome librarian. I said, Ronnie, this is you. And he just cracked up laughing. And then he didn't even notice. So what's the main character's name in the book, y'all? In the contemporary story, not Luella. Nikki, what's her real name? Veronica. That's his granddaughter's name. And so he read the book. We were in Hendersonville during our event. And I said, yeah, and Ronnie is my handsome librarian. He's like, she's so crazy. And I said, Ronnie, what's your granddaughter's name? And he said, Veronica. Veronica! He had read the book, we had done our event, and he never connected that I had named my main character after his granddaughter. So you can see he had his handprints all over this book. And he never connected it, and I wanted to surprise him. So and she's such a precious little girl, and so she's named after her.
That's sweet. That's really sweet. So we've all heard the expression that history is written by the victors. So did you have any aha moments during your research where what you were learning and discovering put into question the veracity of the official record?
Well, yes, the huge discovery we made, and I say it's huge because it changed everything about how we thought about the kingdom folk, was that contrary to that 1957 pamphlet, which was written by a local court stenographer, Sadie Smathers Patton, they were not from Mississippi. We thought they had been all these years, but Ronnie, Suzanne, and I, all three of us, suspected that that was not true. They were just from South Carolina, right down the road. And one of the other things Sadie Patton had said, which I thought, I don't think this is true. Sometimes you're just like, no. And one of the things she had said was that William Montgomery was the mulatto son of an enslaver, and that he had owned slaves himself, that his father had gifted him upon his 18th birthday, and that those people that had originally come up with him were his enslaved people, his slaves. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? Black slave owners were so rare. I mean, we didn't even know they existed until Edward P. Jones told us, right? Like they were so rare. And something about that didn't ring true to me. And we found the Montgomery brothers. There was no evidence of that whatsoever. They were from a farm in South Carolina. They knew the path because they were animal drovers, and they had gone on that turnpike up and down to the Oakland Inn in North Carolina many times. So they led the kingdom folk there. There was just no evidence of anything having to do with Mississippi. And that was huge because it taught us why they came up there in the first place. It also taught us that they had people who they left behind who weren't far, and those were also some of the people who eventually came up as the kingdom grew. So, that was the main thing I would say that changed the course of how I was at least thinking about the kingdom folk.
Interesting. All right. So essential theme in the book is land ownership and property rights. Really, that's the totality of the book. And being able to pass down what you own to your children and your grandchildren, like houses and property, and how that's important to building generational wealth. So can you discuss the legal concept of heirs property and how that's impacted the African American community and other marginalized groups historically here in the United States?
Yeah, so whenever I write historical fiction, I always try to bring a question to it. Like, what am I? I'm not a historian per se. I'm a historian and storyteller. So I'm not just transcribing the history, I'm also bringing my perspective to it. And one of the things that I thought about was this land was so important to the kingdom folk. It was so important to them to own land, to possess it, to be landowners. And so I thought, well, let's talk about why land ownership was important to Black folks and why it was so devastating when we lost it. And one way we lost it, and heirs property in real life has nothing to do with the kingdom story. That was me bringing a question to it. Because heirs property is how many Black folks, particularly in the Carolinas, both North and South, how they lost their land. And so that was my contemporary perspective on the importance of land ownership. So heirs property, and I'll just briefly say what it means. How many of y'all know about heirs property? Okay, some of you do. Okay, so you would have this land and you die without a written will. Now, I originally thought people just died because they didn't write one, right? And we know that there are people who, if you die suddenly or unexpectedly, you may just not have one. But what I found is that many families intentionally did not write it down because they didn't trust the courts and the legal system to protect their interests. So they would orally say, this is your land when I'm out, right? And so, but the problem with that was that it invoked a tenants in common scenario. So with each succeeding generation, you would have more and more tenants in common who owned technically a share of the land. What the heirs property law said was that some developer could come along and they could force they could convince one of those tenants in common to sell their share. If they convince that person to sell their share, they might say, and this person might not even know anything about the land. They might have moved off to Chicago or somewhere. They'd say, I'll give you $600 for this land that you own in North Carolina. And they might say, land, okay, give me the $600. Then they could go back to North Carolina and they could force what they call a forced partition sale. They could force a sale of the property. When they did that, they were supposed to give notice, but the only way they would give notice is like in a small newspaper or some kind of little, legal type newspaper, and it would say like, this land is going to be auctioned on the courthouse steps on such and such a date. Well, of course, nobody would have seen that. They'd have this auction on the courthouse steps, sell it basically to themselves for dirt cheap. And then you're living on your family's land that you've lived on for generations, and someone shows up at the door with an eviction notice, and you know nothing about it. And this happened over and over and over again. And when I would speak with folks on the ground there, I was like, for example, if anybody's ever vacationed in Hilton Head, anywhere in the Carolinas, what else is down there? Seacoast Islands. I don't know about Outer Banks, maybe. Anywhere in Charleston area, anywhere. Gullas, that's all land that was lost to heirs property. South Carolina is ground zero. And literally, if you didn't, there was a case just a few, not even that long ago, a few years ago, and if you look on YouTube, you can find like a little short documentary in North Carolina in Carteret County, and they were called the Reels Brothers, R-E-E-L-S. And if you look up the Reels Brothers, you will see they refused to leave their land. It was their family land, and the judge incarcerated them for 8 years for contempt of court. And they were incarcerated for 8 years and then finally released. And it was a very controversial decision because, they were just simple people living, in trailers on their land. I mean, it's just really quite devastating. And so you see those cases over and over again of people using the law. Like when I was talking to this law professor about it, and I was getting really upset about it, because I was hearing story after story after story. And I was like, this is terrible, this is terrible. And he said, Dolen, you have to remember, it was legal. And so I wanted to, because there were, and you can see, like in my afterword in the book, we're talking about billions of dollars of property loss. I wanted to mention that in the context of late 19th century Black ambition, and clamoring for, like, when we think about this period, we often think about, like, when we think about like the late 1800s, we often think about, when it comes to Black history, we think about sharecropping, or we think about like KKK mob violence, right? But we don't often think about like Black ambition and in terms of rural, like we'll think about like free Black communities in Philadelphia or wherever. But what about just regular Black folks trying to get a piece of the rock, And so that was what I wanted to focus on in the book. But I knew if I did that, I then had to talk about the subsequent loss.
There's a line in the book where you talked about how they used to put Confederate statues right in front of the courthouse.
They did and do. They're still there.
They're still there to send a message, implicit and explicit, like this is not a system that is for you. And it makes it inaccessible, right? And it makes it completely unattainable and unachievable. The fact of you being able to attain social justice for yourself or for your family. Shameless plug for the library. We do so much here at the public library really to try to level the playing field because we know that systems exist and structures exist that have not always been fair to us or just to people in general. So at the public library, we have free Lawyers in the Library program where we connect people to lawyers to get free advice from attorneys on the things that are important to them. We have estate planning programs for free at the library. We have programs to help people prevent foreclosure and things like that, home buying programs. So we're very much focused on how do we level the playing field for everybody in our community.
Are those programs contained in the library?
Yes, they are.
Just wanted to mention that. Support your local libraries.
Exactly, yeah, support your local library. None of these things happen for free, that's for sure. Even though it's free to you, it doesn't happen for free. So funding for libraries and support for libraries is critical. In addition to land ownership and property rights, the book also explores the concepts of freedom from slavery, freedom to love who you want to love, bodily autonomy, connection to one's roots. There's this line in the book that I highlighted because it was so beautiful to me. Oh goodness, and I lost my notes. Hang on a second. Hang on, it's coming back. And it said, they were landowners, governors of their own bodies, caretakers of their own futures, freedmen and women, children of God. I love that line. It was so beautiful. I read it over and over and over again. So the implication here is that these concepts are all interrelated. It's about having the agency to live life on your own terms, use that word ambition, self-determination, to have safety and security, to have options, to see possibilities, to make plans for the future. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today. How do you see those concepts of freedom playing out today? And are we truly free? And what does freedom mean for women and for people of color? That's deep, y'all.
And I don't even remember that line. Did I write that?
You wrote that. I can tell you the page.
You'll have to tell me the page later so I can go see it. What does freedom mean today? I will say that for the kingdom folk, I will say this, like freedom today is the same in some ways as it has always been. It's the same as it was for the kingdom folk. And so, for example, when they went up that mountain, they had, like you said, they had autonomy. They were free to, I mean, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness still is a phrase that means something, right? They had the freedom to put their money together, to buy the things they wanted, They had the freedom, like you say, to love who they wanted to love. Or for Luella, it's like, maybe I don't choose the practical husband. Maybe I choose the husband who I'm like passionately in love with, right? Maybe that's who I marry. And for Jola, her friend, for freedom for her, it's like, maybe I don't marry at all. I think I'm okay with that, She's, got the protection of the kingdom. She's got the safety of living in the community, the food, etc. And so maybe for some women it was, I'm going to live in my cabin by myself, like that's how I want to be free, And so that to me is the same now, like the freedom for us to love how we want to love, to live how we want to live, whether it is to, some women choose this, some women choose that, some men choose, like I feel like it's the same as it's always been. And I think we should remember that some things change, but some things remain the same. And I think historical fiction can remind us of that. And can remind us that we can't take it for granted too, right? That freedom is something we have to continuously work for.
Women in every generation.
And fight for. And I think, here in a library setting, the freedom to read the books we want to read. The freedom for me as a writer to write what I want to write. Recently, I came under fire, in the introduction they mentioned that I had written an introduction to George Orwell's 1984, and recently I have been under attack about that very introduction. But don't I have the right to write what I wanted to say, what I want to say about a book? I mean, and people have the right to disagree, obviously. But the attack has been quite personal, so I think even for myself, freedom is the freedom to write what I want to write, and to read what I want to read, and to say what I want to say, And I think that those are the kinds of things I think about, and that's why I'm so inspired by the kingdom folk, because they fled violence, and they went up that mountain, and they made a decision of how they wanted to live their lives. Sometimes people come to my book signing and they'll say, I'm thinking about getting a plot of land. Like I've heard a lot of stories like this, y'all. I'm thinking about getting a plot of land down south, and all of us having a building and living on the land. I've heard that. Or I've heard like, what if my family and I got together and bought an apartment building and we all lived in the various apartments? I mean, people are thinking like that right now, and there's something to that. There's something to us being in community with each other, And I said, if anything, I hope the book just teaches us to get off the phone and go hug somebody, and see people in person, get in your car and drive, and just go knock on the door and say, hey, I'm here. Let's go to lunch. So when I think of freedom, I don't think it's anything. We're not creating anything new here. It's still life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the same as it's always been. But I do think we have to stay vigilant. We do have to stay vigilant, and I think we gotta be. The collective has always been more powerful. The kingdom folk found power in the community, and we can too. I mean, this room right here is a source of power. If we all decided we were gonna, sign a petition for something, that's more signatures than one. You know what I mean? Or if we all decided we were all gonna put something on our social media at the same time, hey, that could go viral. Like social media has a lot of bad things to it, but there's some good things to it too, in terms of like the power of voices on there. So yeah, I hope that's a muddy answer
I know. It was
to a difficult question.
extremely difficult. I feel like I kind of set you up there, so I
That's okay.
apologize.
I don't know. Did y'all get something out of that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna be ready next time.
So I have one final question for you, and I think we're gonna open it up for y'all to ask some questions, and to give you the opportunity to answer them. So you mentioned before that there was a little controversy about something that you wrote, and I'm just curious. You know, there's a spate of book banning across the country. Where there is, it makes no sense. And when you look at the books that are being targeted and the books that are being banned and the voices that are being silenced, these are books that are predominantly written by women, by people of color, and by members of the LGBT community. So I was just curious if any of your books have been banned that you know of. And you know, what has been your experience just as a writer? Do you feel like it's harder today or easier today for authors of color to get published? And do you think it's gotten easier or if it's gotten harder to tell stories like Happy Land about women, about people of color?
I think it is neither harder nor easier, it's the same. I think it's still hard. I think it's always been hard and it's still hard. You know, I think it, that's kind of where I am. I feel like I have been doing this a long time. My first book came out 15 years ago, and I feel like you know, I'm answering sort of the same questions I was answering then. I'm having some of the same conversation, and so maybe that's not good. Maybe that means it's harder. Like, it should be improving, right? It should be improving, but like, I feel like things have not changed that much. You know, we're all still. You know, I've never been reviewed by the New York Times. You know, Black books are still a very, very small percentage in publishing. That has not grown as much as you would think it has. There's very, very few Black editors in publishing. I've watched many good friends leave the publishing world and who are just no longer there for various reasons. I have not had my book banned, knock on metal. That has not happened to me. But I have been under attack because I dared speak about George Orwell. And I think you know that, like, I'm totally fine, like I said, with people disagreeing, but the attacks on that have been pretty vicious. I've been quiet. It's been in the media. I don't know. You Google it, you'll see. It's been all over the world, actually. And, you know, I have just basically said to myself, I will not be silenced. My publisher has been very, very strongly in my corner and said, you know, they have my back. Because, you know, you can't fight these things by yourself. You gotta get help. And the Orwell family has said they support me. They so that was good. The descendants, you know, so when you have that, and I do feel like, you know, some things have not changed, and we're still out here fighting. And I think the moral of the story for any of us doing any kind of work in our communities is to just keep getting up every single day and doing what it is you do. And that's all you can do. You know, we're all like, we're each one person, but together we're a collective. So every day we got to get up. We reading, buying books, supporting your library, fighting that library funding doesn't get cut because of these great programs you just mentioned, and more. So many things our libraries do for us, y'all. And, you know, library funding is under attack. You know, I just had an email this morning that the DC archives have lost funding, and but there was no like fundraiser, and then I was like, well, what do we do? What happens to the archives, you know? I think about my kids, you know, and what kind of world I want them to be in, but the only thing I can do is just rise to meet the sun each day, you know, hug my neighbors and my friends and my loved ones, be in community, you know, talk to fellow book lovers, read books. I did one thing that, you know, I said in the Orwell intro, and this is a good ending. Is this our last thing? I said, I believe art can heal. I believe that, like, art can heal us. And I do believe that. I really believe that. I really believe, like, art and the community that we create around reading and viewing and going to the movies and stuff, that can really be healing. And one person in one of the articles, I think it was the Newsweek article that was slamming me, one person who was defending me said, you know, I defend her right to talk about her will, but I take issue with the fact that she thinks art can heal. And I thought, okay, well, we can have a discussion about that. Actually, I like that discussion. Let's have that discussion. So I'll just end with that like, I really believe that, like, you know, reading books, viewing art, going to movies, that can really heal what's going on right now. We should just continue to do it.
Mhm.
So Lori, we have time for some questions from the audience.
We do have some time for questions. Did I tell you this was going to be wonderful or not?
Wonderful.
So who has questions? I'll,
Do I have to stand up? Can everybody hear me?
we can hear you.
So what prompted you to include the tall woman's story that William and Robert's father shared with them?
Y'all read too closely. I don't think I had I don't have any, I mean, I'm gonna leave that to the critics, the literary critics to figure out. I think, I just love the idea of her marrying a short man. And, you know, and the whole idea that like where we're from, some of the men stood on tiptoes to kiss the women. I don't know, something about that I found lyrical and lovely, the image of it. But I don't have anything deep to say about this. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I have a question actually about a question that was asked, whether writing, did you find it to be harder or easier in these times? Or do you find it no, because you write from the heart? So it's not harder or easier because when you write from the heart, then it just flows. Or...
Yeah. You're saying in these times with all this going on?
Yes.
I think I am more motivated. Like, when they attacked my oral thing, I got to my disc. You know, and started writing. I was like, they're not gonna shut me up. Don't they know? I'm a loud mouth from Memphis, you know. Like, I was just like more motivated, you know what I mean? I was like, you know, when is my deadline? I don't know, I'm more motivated. I wouldn't say it's harder. It's hard for me to say whether it's harder or easier because I feel like it's always hard. I mean, in the best of times, writing is hard, you know. It's just a hard thing to sit on your desk by yourself all day long, every day for months. And not knowing what's going on in your manuscript is just a hard thing, hard life. But I would say in these times, I'm more motivated. Like,
It teaches you more to think about it, right?
yeah, I'm just kind of like, and in fact, I feel freer because I won't be intimidated. I feel freer to write, you know. And also, I'm like, I have 4 books now, so what do I have to lose at this point?
Hello.
Hi.
I love Happy Land. I
Thank
love
you.
Take My Hand. I'm a historical fiction girl.
Okay.
Are you working on anything new?
I'm trying.
Okay.
I'm trying. I'm not quite there where I need to be. The research files that I need from the federal government have not come in. I don't know if they ever will. So I had to just start without them. So I'm muddying my way through something.
Okay.
I won't say yet because it might not, I don't know.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for being here, your presentation. I thank God for all this. My wife, thank her for inviting me here. But something in your commentary you said about, you heard many, many stories about how people will come together, say we're going to get a plot of land and we're going to move on it, or we're going to get an apartment building. You know, I'm an architect, and the last house I worked on is like 24,000 square feet. And I thought it was a little bit large because the client was a 64-acre farm that they had. They wanted a 7-car garage. The mother wanted her father to live on the property, and the husband wanted his mother to live on the property. So we designed a thing where we have multiple studio areas for different families, all within one building. It was amazing.
That is amazing.
So-
In Maryland?
Excuse me?
In Maryland?
In Maryland, yes, in Maryland. And,
wanna look at
no, I'll show you a picture of one of the renderings, but it's 2 questions. The thing that, I'm gonna get emotional here. How many success stories have you heard about people coming together and actually being successful at uniting on a property and living together as a collective family or community? In South Carolina, my wife and I, her family has a 40-acre farm in North Carolina, and some of the story is like very emotional for her. and she'll tell you about that later. But I don't even, how many of the many stories you heard, many people say we're going to do this, how many have you heard that were successful at accomplishing that, if you have any kind of thought?
Well, a lot of the people who come to me will say either one or two things. They'll either say, I want to do this,
Okay.
like this book has inspired me, or like my family has land and I'm thinking that this is a good use of the land. Like maybe we could put some structures on the land and, you know, or they'll say, my family has land and a bunch of folks live on it. It's already in place.
So very-
But I haven't had anybody to say, I'm gonna do it and then did it. It's more like either aspirational or, you know, my family has property, it's usually Virginia or West Virginia or wherever. They'll say, my family has property in Virginia or Maryland and they all live on it. And so you kind of describe, you know,
What's happening?
what we have. So I do think that there's a possibility that we're at an inflection point where people start seriously figuring out how to do that because the cost of living, the cost of housing is so high. Because I think there's going to be a return to a slower,
Pace of
more, you know, manageable, I don't want to say rural, but maybe, you
Pace
know,
of
pace
life.
of, even the suburbs now is like the city, you know, like if you really want a slower pace, you got to get out there, you know. And so, I think there's a possibility if you were ever thinking about, I know there's a couple of, like tiny home villages that are black owned that I was
One in
reading about.
Atlanta.
That's a possibility where people have a plot of land and people have some kind of, what you call those homes?
Tiny homes?
Modular homes?
Modular homes. See, I knew you would know. And modular homes, like that would be very simple in some ways for people to get a plot of land and do. But if you know, I love the idea, frankly. And I love multi-generation. I would love for my mom to move with me. She doesn't want to, but you know, I love the idea.
What kind of, well, I guess 2 parts. How do you come to choose the story that you're going to bring out? And then what challenges did you have in terms of writing this story? What challenges did you come up against?
Well, I choose something that I'm captivated by. It has to be because it takes so long. I have to be motivated to write it and stay with it. And also, it has to have a question that I want to ask about that. So that, it has to be like a burning question. Because I have a lot of book ideas, y'all. I can't write them all. So it has to be one that's like a burning question. And sometimes people come to me and they say, I have a book idea for you. And it's not my book idea. It's not my book idea. It's like not my book to write. Is what I want to say. Now, if you give me a good book idea, I might take it. I don't know. Like, you know, give it to me. But, you know, but it has to be something that I really can't stop thinking about. And then in terms of challenges, challenges of writing this book?
Yes.
I would just say new research, like having new archival research. I didn't want to just use what was already out there, which wasn't accurate. So part of the challenge was just like finding out what really happened, like really digging deep and putting we had a lot of pieces to put together to figure out who these people were. A lot of my book is what actually happened.
Wow.
Except for the love story, we can talk about that. The love story is a little made up.
Oh, I was gonna ask if that was true or not, because that was
No,
juicy.
no. So, like, in real life, I know, it's pretty juicy. In real life, William does go off to the mine, he is blinded, and then Robert, his younger brother, becomes king. And I always thought, like, well, why didn't he take his own queen? When he became king, why did his brother's wife remain queen? And then there was a palace, right? It wasn't a palace, it was a cabin, but they called it a palace. Who lived there? If he was king and she was queen and she was married to the brother who lived in the palace, was it her, was it him, was it both of them? So I began to imagine that maybe Luella and Robert had a relationship. Because when they buy the land, half the land is in Robert's name and half of it's in Luella, as if they're a couple. So it was just my imagination going crazy. In real life, Luella's children were with William. Okay. And Robert's children had some children back in South Carolina with another lady friend. But I don't know, it could, even though that's the case, maybe.
Be a great sequel.
I've not had the pleasure to read your book yet. but I do have the understanding that this was the kingdom and that they referred to each other as king, queen. Where did that concept come from?
Good question. I think we don't know exactly why they decided to call themselves royalty, other than the likelihood, I'm gonna say more likelihood than possibility, they had some ancestral memories passed down about African royalty, yes. And that wouldn't have been like implausible.
Right.
Right, that wouldn't have been implausible. Now, I don't think it was, because my editor asked me, you know, when we were working on it, she's like, so if Luella and Robert are the king and queen, isn't their son the prince? You know, and I never found any evidence that the children were considered prince and princesses. So I don't think it was a typical monarchy and sort of blood lineage. I think it was just the heads, who they considered to be the heads of the settlement. And I do think they had a council, which would have been more in keeping of what an African village would have, a council of elders and a king. And so I use that. One of the historians told me that at one point in his research, because there's all these oral tapes of descendants in the archives, that the houses were built in a circle to signify egalitarian sort of. And I thought, well, that's interesting. You have a king and a queen and a council, but your houses are in a circle. But that also might be something African about that.
No hierarchy.
Yeah, where you have a hierarchy, but you also have like a circular living arrangement. You know what I mean? Where it's not quite what we think of when we think of a Eurocentric monarchy.
One other thing, has there been any kind of genealogical research in terms of
Kingdom
the original kings, queens?
You mean going back to Africa?
Anything. Well, that's what made me think about it.
Yeah.
You know, if in fact it was, you know, some sort of reference to African culture, whether or not there's been any kind of genealogical research
Or DNA.
of the family.
Well, I would say in terms of going back, I didn't go back that far.
Okay.
Because Suzanne wanted to. She was like, well, now that we know this, why don't we do this? And I was like, okay. She's in Jazz Bunny. She's gonna find out everything. But that's why we also made the web display so that historians can come along and pick up where we left off. Now, there are descendants living now. The ones that I know of live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they're quite successful. One of them was a federal judge, another one, you know, they're quite successful family. And I spoke with one of the matriarchs of one of the lines, and we were able to share with the family what we found out. They were not descendants of Luella, but they were descendants of the original kingdom inhabitants, one of them named Wiley Bennett, who I think shows up in the book. They were descendants of Wiley Bennett. And so we were able to share with them what we learned about Wiley, who went on to own his own big plot of land outside of the kingdom. It's just neat. They were neat people, y'all. They were neat.
That's awesome.
I really enjoyed the book, and as I'm working towards the end, it became a nail biter for me because I didn't know how it was going to end.
We're not gonna spoil it though.
I'm not
Okay.
doing that. That was my second statement because I wanted to know how you decided on the ending without giving away
Okay.
the ending because in my mind it could have been some, none, or all,
Yeah,
and you would understand that
yeah,
without giving away anything.
yeah.
So how did, I mean, I thought it could have ended a variety of ways.
Yeah, I agree.
So how did you?
It was very hard. The ending was really hard.
Yeah.
I called so many people about how to end the book plausibly, in a way that legally worked. Because the truth of the matter is, people lost their land. It was just a terrible, terrible thing. And once you lost it, okay, we could be getting into too much.
Right.
But I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave it. You told me to stop. Okay,
Right, that's why I
tell me
said
to stop.
some, none, or all. So there was three.
Yeah.
There's a woman in the red
Yes.
I was having lunch with my girlfriend's friend
Uh-huh. Oh.
and she went to her little book bag and took out a notebook and she said about 5 sentences. And I said, what do you want to say she's writing for?
Wow.
So I'm wondering, when did you start doing things like that?
I don't know, my mom's here, she might. Mom, when did I start writing?
Elementary school.
Oh, wow, that's good.
That's when I was writing little stuff. I had a typewriter, I had a play school typewriter, I thought I was a writer.
Okay.
Can get a photograph
Just
of
that,
from the
because
back.
I'm curious, as a professor and a writer, now there's AI. I'm so curious about your feelings on the impact it will have on the imagination of young people.
Yeah. You know,
AI
I'm
doesn't
still,
imagine,
I'm
it
old
regurgitates.
school, y'all. Like, I said, the minute we move to cryptocurrency, just shoot me. I don't even know what that is. What is that? I don't even know. I'm still processing AI. I don't, in fact, I teach and I can recognize when my students use it, but I can't prove it. But I recognize it when I see it. It's dead writing.
Uh-huh.
And
It doesn't imagine.
it's just, it's just dead. It's like wood.
No soul.
No soul. No soul. And they'll never be able to create soul.
No.
It's kind of like cooks who follow recipes and cooks who just get in there and start doing stuff. You can't put a recipe to some cooks and chefs. It's just no way to capture it, And so I know that there are other writers who could speak more eloquently to what's happening legally. I know that there is a lawsuit going on with how they're using our work to train AI without our permission. I know that PEN America is doing work to protect writers against AI because, there's all these ways. But I don't know, it's overwhelming to me, so I don't have a good answer. There are other writers who can speak more eloquently to it than I can, Rachel, but I don't, girl, it's hard.
Yes.
Not really a question, but I just want to say thank you for highlighting the heirs property issue. I am an attorney by trade, estate planning, and what I've seen is it's absolutely startling, it's heartbreaking. And we're lacking when it comes to estate plans, wills. So my request really of you and everyone else in this room, there are a few dates that we could really bring this to the forefront to our communities, our families, our organizations. August is National Make a Will Month.
Okay.
So if you just take this book and
August,
share it with your
National
family, your
Make a Will
friends, and
Month.
say, the back couple pages, you highlight heirs property issues, spread the word. We need to start putting our heirs property, our property that we own into our documents. You mentioned the legal process. It's going to continue until we take control of our assets and start naming beneficiaries on our deeds, putting those things in our wills. I was at a conference yesterday of the Association of Black Estate Planning Professionals. It was one of the topics. And so I appreciate you for bringing that up because I saw a lot of the heartache when families lost the land, and since the early 1900s, African Americans have lost trillions of dollars in inheritance. We own less land today than we did in the early 1900s. So thank you for bringing that topic up, and celebrate August for Will Month, and then October, every third week is National Estate Planning Awareness Week.
Now, let me ask you a question. Are you a lawyer at Maryland?
I am,
Are-
in DC.
And DC, are holographic wills legal here, like handwritten?
No,
No.
they're not. There are a couple of very rare exceptions.
Okay,
If someone's a Maryland resident, they're away at war, perhaps.
okay.
They scribbled something down.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, we could just write it right
Very
now.
limited, very limited.
Oh, well, that's no
Yeah,
good.
no, so
Don't try to do it on a napkin.
That'll be more trouble than it's probably worth to write it, so.
Aretha
get
Franklin, that's
your
what
wills
comes
in
to
place,
mind.
you all. It's so critically important.
And we can do it at the library. Yes, you can.
Yes, and I'll call the library as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Look at one in the back, she's had her hand up so long.
Hello, thank you. When you're not writing, who do you read? What books do you read? Hey, good evening.
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. I heard y'all talking about S15 Cosby a moment ago. Loved him. Do y'all know Brendan Slocum, who's also from Virginia? He's a classical musician, but writes like musical thrillers. Put some Brendan Slocum, I think his latest is Symphony of Secrets.
Yes,
Is that the latest?
that is the latest.
And I love my friend Victoria Christopher Murray. Somebody here mentioned her. Her latest is Harlem Rhapsody.
Yeah.
My friend Alelia Bundles has a new book out. I took my mom to her. She's the descendant of Madam C.J. Walker.
Okay.
And she has a new nonfiction book out about her grandmother, was it grandmother or great-grandmother? About Alelia Walker, who was Madam C.J.'s daughter. And so that's my friend's great-grandmother. And those Walker women, y'all, they were rich and they were something else. And they were black women living large in like the 1920s. You've got to read about the family. And if you get a book, I think she's coming to Baltimore soon, I can't remember, but take a look at Joy Goddess is the name of that book. So many books that I love. I run a historical fiction book club on Facebook, so if you're on, you can go to my website, you can join the book club from there, and we read. Recently, we read, come on, Dolen, Chris Bojalian's latest.
Oh, the
Jackal's Mistress, thank you, which was a Civil War novel, so lovely, so beautifully written. Just love that. Now it's like a long poem. It's so gorgeous. The Jackal's Mistress. If y'all like, I don't know if anybody likes Civil War novels. I do. I have a thing for us historical fiction girlies who love anything history. And I love Charmaine Wilkerson. Her latest Good Dirt. She's like a once in a generation type of writer, just phenomenal. And of course, all of my historical fiction, just friends, and Kate Quinn, Stephanie Dre.
Sharon Ewell Foster, rest in
Shonda
power.
Tate has a new one. Who you mentioned?
I was saying Sharon Ewell Foster, rest in power.
Oh, Rest in Power. I don't know that one.
She did the Nat Turner series. She's no longer alive.
Oh, okay.
She did the Nat Turner series that can't turn into the film.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Oh, yes, Diane McKinney Weststone. She's a legend.
My question is not necessarily about the book, but in general, I read all formats, physical books, ebooks, all of them,
Yeah.
books.
Yes.
How can we, as readers, best support writers so that they're reading the full benefit of their work?
I get asked this question a lot, and I think maybe different writers have different answers. So I'll just tell you.
Buy in any form you can.
Check it out from the library. Library book sales is a big thing. So getting on that waiting list, even if there's a waiting list, getting on the waiting list for the audiobook, all of that. They'll order more copies if there's more demand.
Refer our books.
Amazon's fine for me. Independent bookstores are excellent. I love a good independent bookstore. There's so many right here in Baltimore. The Ivy is owned by my good friend Emma. I just was in another one, what's it called? The Greedy what? Greedy Reads. I was just there a couple weekends ago. That was such a cute. I love independent bookstores. I also think if you get it from Barnes & Noble, like that's a good one because we get good placement and any way. If you have the book and you know somebody that can't afford a hardcover, pass them the book. I'm fine with that too, because guess what? That gives me word of mouth. That gives me chatter. Maybe they'll post on, like you give them the book, say, okay, make sure you post on social media or write a review. Reviews help a lot. On Goodreads, there's a to be read. What's that list? To read. What's it called? Want to read. Adding, my publisher checks that number. How many people have it on their want to read list on Goodreads? Yeah. So that number, reviews, word, I mean, and I always just say, like, if you leave this event, tell 5 people about the book. Like, just mention it in passing. Don't wait for somebody to say, what are you reading? Just say, like, have you read this book, Happy Land? You know, because they say it takes a person hearing a book title 6 times before they buy it. So we really need, like, just, you know, and I have always been a word of mouth type of writer because, like I said, I'm not in the New York Times, you know, I'm not, like, winning a Pulitzer Prize, you know, I'm not Zadie Smith or Chimamanda, who are phenomenal writers, but the media they don't even, like when Zadie Smith came to town, I said, Zadie, how many more book events are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm just doing 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, and then you're gonna do like Zoom events? She's like, no, then I'm going back to London. Like literally, Zadie doesn't have to tour. Emily Henry, anybody an Emily Henry fan? Love her, she writes this great contemporary romance, does not tour at all. You know, like just doesn't. I'm like so jealous. How do you get that, Emily? What can I do to be like? But no, I'm just kidding. I love touring. I love talking to people, as you can see. But yeah, like anything that you can do to just keep the, they call it now in publishing the long tail of the book. No longer do you just hit the New York Times list the first week. You have the long tail, and it just keeps selling and keeps selling and keeps selling. And that's the people. Because you can't continue to get media for 2 years. I mean, like Take My Hand still sells because of y'all. I'm not getting any Take My Hand media, but it just, every week I look at it and it just continues to sell, and that's my readers doing that.
And I'm going to add one more.
Yeah.
Just give the gift of books.
Yes.
I'm the auntie where I don't give my children, the children in my life, I don't give them toys. I give them books. Do the same.
That's right.
I think we have time for one more.
I just want to make a really quick comment.
Okay.
I haven't read the new book, which
Yeah.
I wanted to, but our book club here at Owens Mills recently read Take My Hand, which we loved.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if you're in a book club, I have a VIP book club list. Just reach out to me on my website and I'll add you to that list, and you get like little perks. Secret, you gotta be in the VIP list.
This was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're wrapping up here. Have a great day.
So thank you, Dolen and Sonia. This was an amazing afternoon. And I just want to add something. When Dolen talked about word of mouth, not just for books, but we love having you here. Please use that same word of mouth to talk about our library programs. We have author programs, we have legal programs, we have programs that are about art. And the more people who come to our programs, the more that we can have. Yeah. Oh, yes. Over here are flyers of upcoming programs and calendar of events.
Thank you for
Please pick one of
watching.
those up on your way out.